Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining Museum Hue on our first session and our first of three-part virtual workshop series. The Advocacy Accelerator series will help our organization demystify the lobbying and advocacy process by hearing from the experts in government. I want to thank our first panelists who are joining us this afternoon to discuss the critical role of city and state governments playing in support of the arts of New York. I want to now introduce Stephanie Cunningham, the founder of Museum Hue, to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, and also want to thank Senator Serrano and Councilmember Ossé for being here with us. So this series comes out of the Hue Arts NYC initiative that we embarked upon in 2021, which looks at the health and well-being of arts organizations of color throughout New York City. And New York City is arguably the arts capital of the world, but many of those who helped make the creative fabric of the city's arts landscape have not reaped the benefits of their enormous contributions. Missing from the standard purview is the creative dynamism alive in communities of color throughout the 5 boroughs, far away from Museum Mile, Lincoln Center, and the like. The experience and aesthetics of Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian, Pacific Islander, and all people of color are representative of the rich tapestry of cultures found across the city. Through a culturally responsive pedagogy, they place people and community care at the center. They make meaningful connections between their constituencies, experiences, and their offerings through exhibitions, programs, and social services. They are thought leaders of community-centered rather than collection-centered approaches. Support for their work is crucial. And Hue Arts NYC is working to transform New York City's arts sector. It aims to create a pathway for greater acknowledgement and support of Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian, Pacific Islander, and all people of color arts entities. This initiative is a conduit that provides not only a framework to present the stories of those who build and lead these arts entities, but data that helps capture the context in which these organizations operate. This is illustrated in anecdotal stories and data graphs found throughout our report. We hope to bring forth multi-dimensional support, including financial support for these arts entities. In doing so, Hue Arts NYC also aims to promote the social and economic mobility of communities of color throughout the 5 boroughs. Not only a vital issue in the arts, but one that is directly connected to the deep-rooted, systematic, and generational racism that has overwhelmingly affected these communities. So again, thank you all for joining us, and I will kick it over to my colleague, Addison.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. My name is Addison Tobias, and I'm the Programs Manager at Museum Hue. Thank you all for joining us today. And Museum Hue is a member-driven organization dedicated to uplifting the voices of people of color in the arts and culture field through different resources and programming such as today. So this Advocacy Accelerator series, it really aims to demystify the lobbying process for organizations by providing actionable next steps and resources so that you can all learn how to champion your organizations through government advocacy. Throughout the series, city and state elected officials and government staffers will discuss the government's critical role in supporting the arts and illuminate the process of government outreach, funding applications, and collective advocacy. So as Stephanie mentioned, this series really stems from the research findings and recommendations in the Hue Arts NYC and NYS Brown Paper Report led by Museum Hue. And I will be sure to send this out to you all after the program today. This series is also being created with the intention of developing a living and breathing toolkit that will be housed on our website and our member platform Circle. So we all will be able to access and use these resources once the sessions are over. If you are not a member and are interested in becoming one, your organization can join for $150 a year. And as an individual, you can join for $30 a year and access all prior programming and resources and all upcoming programming and resources. So I really encourage you all to sign up for membership if you are not already. If you have any questions that arise today, you can email them after this to hello@museumhue.com, and we will be sure to send them over to Martha following today's program. Museum Hue is committed to creating programming and resources that will continue to uplift and support all POC founded and led arts stability. And as we really continue to bolster the resources that stem from the Hue Arts NYC and NYS research and reports, please be sure to keep an eye out for our upcoming 2024 programs and consider membership. So now I'd like to pass it back over to Martha to kick off this really exciting discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie and Addison, for updating us on the advocacy work Museum Hue has done this year. To learn more, please check out our website and follow us on social media. Now, I want to introduce our panelists. First, New York State Senator José M. Serrano, a longtime South Bronx resident, was first elected to the New York State Senate in November of 2004. He serves as the chair of the Senate Majority Conference and is also the chair of the Committee of Cultural Affairs, Tourism, Parks, and Recreation. We also have our second panelist, who is the New York City Council member Ossé, the co-chair of the Brooklyn delegation and the chair of the New York City Council Committee on Cultural Affairs, Libraries, and International Intergroup Relations. So we will start with the first question going to State Senator Serrano. Senator Serrano, as a State Senate Arts and Culture Chair, what does your position entail?
Well, thank you, Martha. And first, my gratitude to Museum Hue and to Stephanie and Addison and everyone at Museum Hue for inviting me to participate today alongside a wonderful colleague and council member in Mr. Ossé, a person who is a tremendous advocate for the arts. And I'm always very happy to see him when we run into each other at cultural events throughout New York City. So this is, I think, a really good question, because people sometimes say, what is it exactly that you do? But, as chair of the Committee on Cultural Affairs, I really feel that I am chair of the best committee in the Senate, and no disrespect to any of the others. It is, I think, one of the broadest and in many ways the most satisfying in the terms of the things that we get to explore and talk about and the bridges that we're able to build. I feel very strongly that the arts and culture are foundational in our society, and they should be recognized as such when we put our budgets together and when we think about legislation. The arts, having worked in the arts many years ago, and seen how the arts can be transformative for communities, in particular communities of color, I feel that they are the perfect vehicle for discussions on social justice, on equity, on inclusion. The arts have always been at the forefront of a lot of issues that elected officials in the past did not want to deal with. The arts and the artists, usually at times to their own detriment, were grappling with the inequalities that were happening in society and putting them at the forefront in a way that the society can actually coalesce around, as opposed to stratifying the community. So I feel very deeply that in my role as chair of this committee, we get to sort of try to build bridges around issues and around things that are sometimes left unsaid or not dealt with. So that's sort of the long rambling answer, but the quick answer is that as chair of this committee, legislation that is referred to that has anything to do with the arts and culture goes through my committee. We vote, the members of the committee vote on these bills, and if they are successful through our committee, they then move through the process eventually to the floor of the Senate for a full vote. In addition, we ensue oversight of the arts and culture as far as the budget goes, and we have budget hearings, and we talk to folks from NISCA, and we fight for additional funding for the arts. And that's something that I feel is important for us to do as elected officials. So again, a bit rambling, but that's my answer to that question.
Thank you for that, Senator. Now on to Councilmember Ossé. As the New York City Council Arts and Cultural Chair, how does your position entail?
Well, first and foremost, good afternoon, Museum Hue, Stephanie, Martha. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all of the work that you do for the arts and culture community at large. And hello also to my dear friend and colleague, Senator Serrano. I actually have been meaning to reach out to you. I hope you're going to SOMO so that we can finally sit down and talk about the arts together in a warm climate. So I will be texting you after this panel. Yeah, I mean, the work that we do, or that I do as chair of the Committee on Cultural Affairs, is very akin to what the senator does on a state level. We provide oversight, which I believe is one of the most important things that we do over the Department of Cultural Affairs within the city of New York. This is making sure that their goals for Create NYC, the money that they're allocating, all of the great work that this agency does is done correctly, and also in tangent with the priorities of all of the people of New York City, whether that's diverse funding across a plethora of different organizations through CDF grants, whether it's that the grant awarding process has a committee of folks who truly represent the community at large. So that's what a lot of my main priorities have been, as chair of this committee, is providing that necessary oversight over DCLA or the Department of Cultural Affairs. In addition to that, I prioritize legislative issues that pertain to culture within New York City, ranging from resolutions around city holidays down to actual legislation that reforms the DCLA agency as a whole. For example, we are really hoping to get a bill that I introduced this year, which would amend the city charter and require the Department of Cultural Affairs to report annually on department funding for arts and cultural organizations and institutions, just so that we have more of a proper breakdown on where that money is going, where taxpayer dollars is going, and making sure that it's allocated equitably across all of our 5 boroughs and 4 organizations that are as diverse as our city is. And finally, I see myself as being a champion for culture, for our organizations, for our institutions, and making sure that every city budget is prioritizing the very fabric that makes our city the city that it is. And that's those who attribute to the culture that makes New York City as admirable as it is. So every budget, I'm out there rallying, making sure that we don't see any cuts, and making sure that I'm really putting my face out there and voice out there and energizing my colleagues to make sure that we prioritize culture fiscally because of all the effects that we know that comes through when we fund our culture sector within New York.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Council Member. So you're going to be leading our second question. How do you decide which legislation to support?
Yeah, absolutely. So I try to support everything that comes across my desk. I believe that I believe in democracy. I believe that when I know it sounds like a silly thing to say, but in these days it's something that I try to say as much as I can. When there is support, for different legislation around, especially cultural events or culture issues like open programming and open culture. These are things that my constituency benefits from. These are things that the city benefits from, not only in terms of economic lens, but in terms of just the joy that it brings to all of our various different constituencies. I try to say yes to as many things as I possibly can. There are some limitations. I think the speaker has most of the power in terms of what comes through the floor, but I like saying yes to everything, especially when it comes to culture. Culture is not that problematic of a committee, I will say. So I think some of the bills, are not, bringing out hordes of people who are protesting me. However, I really try to say yes to everything and making sure that the legislative priorities, mainly that come from advocates such as yourselves, is prioritized through my legislative agenda and hopefully through the committee that I represent.
Awesome. Thank you, Council Member. Senator Serrano, how do you decide which legislation to support?
Well, again, as the council member said, there is a process. And yes, thankfully, this committee is one of the committees that people actually galvanize around. The committee covering the arts as well as parks. these are issues that people have a hard time arguing with. Who doesn't support the arts? Who should, who doesn't support our parks? These are things that should be universally supported. They should transcend a lot of the political ideology and be one of those things that people can all coalesce around. However, that doesn't always happen when it comes to funding. And I think that is one of the areas that we try to fight very hard for. And to answer your question about individual legislation, these things go through our committee. We probably don't have as much arts legislation in Albany as maybe there is in New York City. I'm unsure about that. But again, the arts and culture in New York City, and I was in the city council 23 years ago, and I had the good fortune of being chair of this wonderful committee that Chairman Ossé is handling so wonderfully. And it was a lot. It was a lot of hearings. It was a lot of work. It was a tremendous amount that went into it. When I came to the state level, to be honest with you, I was actually surprised that there was actually less happening with the arts and culture in Albany. And you're like, wait a minute, but this is for the entire state of New York. Why isn't there more? And I saw that as an opportunity to show that the arts and culture are important, not just in New York City, but out on Long Island, upstate New York, Western New York, Buffalo, Binghamton, you name it, Syracuse. The arts have shown themselves to be an economic driver in communities that had been economically depressed. When we look at ways to sort of change the economics in a community, the arts and artists have always been at the forefront of that revitalization. So framing it from that perspective, I try to sort of pull the arts out of being just a New York City centric issue beyond that. But again, we get some good legislation that comes through. I'm very happy to support progressive legislation that really helps empower artist communities that for a long time hadn't been heard. So I look forward to continuing to do that in the upcoming session.
Awesome. Thank you for your support. So Senator Serrano, how can an arts organization benefit from government funding?
A great deal. It's something that obviously can be very helpful when you consider that some arts organizations, well, I should speak even more broadly. Many of our arts organizations are not flush with money, especially some of the mid-size and smaller ones that even before the pandemic were struggling to keep their doors open. And one of the biggest tragedies is when an artist or an arts organization has to stop doing what they love to do, and they have to stop bringing forth their gifts to the world because they can't make ends meet and they can't put food on the table, and they're not able to do the things that they really choose to do, but there's just the money is not there. So I really do believe that government funding is intrinsically important to the arts movement, to arts and culture in New York City and New York State, because it shows, first of all, that we as a government prioritize this, that we believe that this is important enough for us to allocate taxpayer dollars for it. The other side of it is, I think that it shows almost the good housekeeping seal of approval, where organizations that go through that really stringent process of applying for government funding and having to do all of the reporting and all of the proper things that should be there. I think it also, gives them maybe an opportunity to raise money privately. So I do think that there is a lot of good benefit that could come from government funding.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Senator. Council member, how would an arts organization benefit from government funding?
The senator really, uplifted a lot of the benefits of what, public funding does for arts organizations, most especially that stamp of approval when it comes to, fundraising from private donors. I think that it's an extreme benefit to these organizations that may have had struggle with fundraising prior to going through, as the senator said, a very stringent process of getting public dollars. But I will say that it's the government's duty to fund arts and education. This isn't our money. This isn't the council members' money. It's not the senators' money. It's the money of the people, and the people love the arts. I mean, as the senator said before, no one has issues with arts and culture. It's something that people want more of. I think that many of our organizations are able to survive because of CDF grants, right? I think New York City is the largest funder of the arts out of every city in this country. I think we should be doing more. I think we should be allocating more money towards arts funding, towards the grant process, and in terms of supporting most especially smaller organizations who truly rely on this funding. I think we should make achieving and receiving this funding a lot easier, right? That's why we're trying to make this process as transparent as possible. I don't think anything can be too transparent when it comes to government. Many people would disagree with me on that. But the money for these organizations allows them to do what they do. And, something that I always say that, the commissioner always says about, arts and culture is that, arts and culture can do more when they have a lot more, right? There is no limits when it comes to the arts. I mean, not only are these organizations pleasurable for us to witness as, voyeurs, but they provide education, they provide safety, daycare, childcare, a plethora of different, services to the people of New York, and funding from the government allows them to provide all of those services to the people of New York.
Thank you for that.
Can I just piggyback on something that the council member said that got me thinking? It's true that the arts organizations rely so heavily on government funds because I believe they also provide the stability that the arts organizations need. There's a lot of planning that goes involved with an arts organization. You're thinking about your next exhibition. You're thinking about who you can hire, or maybe you can't, or your next season of performances. But if there's that instability in funding for the organization, that makes it very difficult to plan ahead. So I do believe, as the council member mentioned, that it provides so many tangible benefits to that organization, but also provides a bit of stability so that they can continue to move forward in a very methodical way.
Thank you for that follow-up. Council member, how should an arts organization engage with their elected officials and government agencies?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the number one piece of advice that I give to arts organizations is to really come into these meetings, whether it's with council member staffs or the council members themselves, and really show those individuals what you're doing within their communities, right? I cannot tell you how many times I've had, a budget meeting with an arts organization, and they're, doing wonderful work, maybe, in Harlem, or in, Jamaica, Queens. But when I ask, what is the work that you're doing within my district? And I know it sounds a bit selfish, but, I have to be selfish for my constituents, as does every elected official. And I think that these organizations really need to be coming into these meetings where, if you are doing work in that district, you really got to provide those numbers, invite your council members, your elected officials, state elected officials to the events that you're doing, whether it's at a school, whether it's, through a CASA grant, SUCASA grant, make it a moment for your elected, right? I think elected officials are narcissists, so make sure that they look good by you making them look good, by showing them the work that you're doing within the community. They're narcissists, except Senator Serrano and myself. But I think that organizations got to be coming in with those stats. These are the questions we're going to be asking. Break it down for us so that it's clear as day. And then when you're trying to, this is a bit of a harder part when you want to expand, to another district. Maybe start doing some work in there before the meeting that you have with that elected official, right? I think that's always just a benefit, to have those stats, to even have a constituent, a parent of a student within your class, letting our offices know that they love this, right? I can't tell you enough times how many principals, will have a program at their school and they're like, the kids love this, like we cannot lose this. And getting that call is always beneficial for me to hear, as for my other colleagues, and making sure that we support specific organizations.
Thank you, Council Member, for that. Senator Serrano, how should the arts organizations engage with their elected officials and government agencies on the state level?
Well, and echoing the sentiments of Councilmember Ossé, having them sort of talk to us about how their work is impactful in our communities, and also how it is it's sort of engaging in change and in education, and how is it being that change maker that the arts should and could be. And I think that is also critically important, because the arts are far more than something that is aesthetically pleasing. It is something that has the ability to reach into our souls and give us that enlightenment that we need in order to better understand other communities, ourselves, our history, where we're going in the future. So, arts organizations explaining what their vision, their plan, their mission is important, how they're engaging with students, how are they letting them know about sort of careers in the arts, or different other types of programs and ways that the arts can lead to a better way of life for our communities. That's something that I always like hearing about.
Great. So that leads to our next question, Senator. How does giving testimony to impact government funding, and why is it important for organizations to attend hearings and give testimony?
Well, as a public facing entity, we as elected officials, our job is to interact with the public, with organizations, you name it. And I think that's one of the most gratifying parts of this profession, is that we get to interact with so many different people and we learn about so many different things along the way. So these hearings, these opportunities to hear from arts organizations is very educational for us. I'm kind of like a sponge. I like to hear, I probably listen a lot more than I talk. I want to hear what the different organizations are doing, but I also want to hear what they're going through, because a lot of times we don't hear about the struggles that a lot of arts organizations are having in order to keep their doors open, to maintain a staff, to plan for their next season or their next exhibition. These are things that are important for us to learn, because we want to break down a lot of the myths that maybe exist about the arts, that they're sort of some elitist thing that people engage in. And, no, I have seen the arts be a grassroots movement. I have seen the arts be a change maker. I've seen it in my own life, and the lessons that I've learned about life through the arts have been some of the most impactful. So I want to hear how that engagement with the community is going.
Thank you, Senator. Council Member, same question. How does giving testimony impact government funding, and why is it important for organizations to attend your hearing and give testimony?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely I literally just had a meeting with committee council about this today, and we're actually about to make a change within how I run city council hearings. But testifying really gives these organizations a chance to allow the agency, right, that we're providing oversight over, DCLA, to hear straight from the advocates, right? Because we may have these really detailed hearings with the agency, and they're saying they're doing this, and we're like, we're not hearing that, but it's not us that's experiencing that. And there's kind of this standstill between us and the agency on what's being done and what may not be getting done. And I've definitely seen the agency stick around a little bit even after folks testify. But my team was talking today, something we're about to change in our hearings is we're going to allow those who are testifying to testify first, so that the agency will be there when folks are testifying. We really want to make sure that we're prioritizing the voices of advocates and those who are directly impacted by literally how the government works in relation to the arts, and making sure that myself and, the agency that is providing those services is hearing straight from, the mouths of those who are directly impacted. So really excited to start putting that into shape, just so that we are making sure that I'm sure that there are so many people that have testified. Maybe you're on this call, maybe you're not, where you feel like you're not being heard, and you might be wasting your time, because sometimes you are taking really, really necessary time out of your day to come to these hearings. I want to make sure that those concerns are definitely heard by not only me, but the agency.
Yes, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. And council member, can you explain the difference between your office and the Department of Cultural Affairs, DCLA, and how do you work with this agency?
Yeah, so I'm a elected official and chair of this committee. So I'm a lawmaker. I write laws that are related to a plethora of different things, and things that are related to cultural affairs. I represent my own district, so I make allocations to different arts organizations in general, as well as capital projects. But I really do provide that oversight over DCLA, and DCLA is definitely the agency that carries out a lot of the work that government puts in place, right? They oversee the applications for CDF grants. They dole out CDF grants. They have individuals that redo those applications and conduct those interviews. They are supposed to have a cultural plan to make sure that our various different cultural organizations are receiving the funding that comes to them through the budget that the council negotiates on. I think the council and DCLA works in tandem with this agency, but I think you could see us more as getting the money and making the rules, and them as supposed to be carrying out the rules and doling out the money.
Thank you for that, council member. Senator Serrano, what is the difference between your office and the New York State Council on the Arts, and how do you work with this agency?
Well, thank you. So as an elected official, we're part of a legislative body of elected individuals who, as the council member said, we write laws, we draft legislation, and we formulate a budget, amongst other things. The New York State Council on the Arts is an arts council. They are basically the agency of the state of New York that allocates and sets the formulation and the allocation of funds for different arts organizations. They apply to NYSCA, to New York State Council on the Arts. We don't control the parameters in which they set forth. Where we do have power is through oversight and through funding. So we fight for an overall arts budget that will be given to NYSCA either for grants or for capital. And last year, in particular, we had an executive budget proposal of around $40 million. And through the efforts of the legislature and through negotiations with the governor, we were able to enact a final budget that was above $80 million for the arts. And the NYSCA then will grant that funding out based on their parameters. During the budget, when we have the opportunity to have the executive director of New York State Council on the Arts come before our committee, we can give feedback that we're hearing from the community, from arts organizations. How is this funding getting there? Is there equitable appropriation? Are we reaching the groups that we really need to reach? Are we sort of creating the environment for the growth of arts and culture throughout the state of New York? And they respond. And this is, I think, part of the sort of the give and take and back and forth, the natural tension within government, which is healthy and important and vital. And that's basically how we move forward with that agency.
Thank you for that, Senator. And now, can you talk to us about some of the small ways art organizations can participate in advocacy on the state level?
Well, I think arts organizations, as they have been for decades, letting us know, reaching out to us as elected officials. We are here. It is our job to listen to our community, and we listen to our district, we listen to members of our district, and we listen to our broader community. In the case of Councilmember Ossé and myself, we listen to the arts. and we listen to what we're hearing from all corners of that. So I think that, the visits to Albany are wonderful. We get to hear from arts organizations there around budget time, outside of budget time, during district work, hearing from local arts groups, hearing how things are impactful, where the room for growth could be. All of these things are very important. We certainly look forward to hearing that feedback, and it is critically important in how we determine as a state how we implement policy.
Thank you for that, Senator. Council member, what are some of the small ways arts organizations can participate in the city advocacy?
Absolutely. I mean, attend rallies whenever I or Senator Serrano hosts a rally. I think those are definitely helpful in showing the show of force that exists within the arts community. Showing up to testify at any budget hearings. I think those are some of the most important hearings to have, especially to let the agency know about the issues in terms of what's working and what's not working within the various different agencies or admin that we correspond with. This isn't necessarily like a small way of how to advocate for your priorities, but I really do believe that when it comes to the larger budget and what's bound to come in the future, I think a lot of the direction obviously needs to be put on the council, and you have a champion with me as the chair, but really on the mayor. I think that this is a art city, and I think that the mayor has a liking of the arts, and I think that he needs to consistently hear from your organizations, especially from cultural organizations of color, Black organizations. This mayor should really hear how helpful the government is to these organizations, and how they're struggling. I think that there are a lot of organizations who are struggling in this time of need. I think that us as council members, we do have some wiggle room in terms of where to negotiate on these various different budgets and how arts is funded as a whole. But the guy with all the money is the mayor of New York, and I think that he's accessible in terms of hearing from arts orgs. I tell it like it is.
We appreciate that, council member. And our last question, because we're getting close to time, and we really appreciate your availability for this. How are you thinking about addressing racial equity in arts and culture across the city?
Yeah, I mean, it's transparency for me. I think that we need as much transparency in terms of every single step of this process. Who is reviewing these applications for grants, right? What is the breakdown by borough, by race? Where are those grants? Where are those monies going? I think that's where I see a lot of my work in making sure that we are shining a light on what's working and what's not working, so that when we see what's not working, we can point directly towards it and find a solution, and making sure that we're funding equitably and as diversely as possible.
Thank you for that, council member. And Senator Serrano, how do you think about addressing racial equity in the arts and culture across New York State?
Well, I think that that's a really important question, and one that is critical. It's always been critical. It's something that I think about quite a bit. There's several ways. I think increasing the overall pot of funding is extremely important. I think if you look at state arts funding for decades, it remained relatively flat. When you factor in inflation, there wasn't any real investment, real increase year over year. There would be a cut, there would be a restoration in the final budget, and we thought we had won something, but really we were just running in place. And that was hurting probably the smaller arts organizations or the arts community of color more than others, because there was less resources to begin with there. So I think having a real deep understanding of how critically important the arts are in communities of color is one of the things that we as elected officials can bring forth. I have to say that it is very gratifying to see that over the last few years, there has been more of a geographic diversity and understanding how important the arts are statewide. A lot of times I felt like this wasn't really front burner issue to a lot of elected officials, But now with like sort of newer elected officials in different parts of the state, Western New York, Rochester, upstate, Long Island, you're starting to see people have a deeper understanding of the arts as an economic engine and as a change maker, and also how arts communities of color in the Latino arts, Black arts, you name it. This is something that is so important for local communities and brings about empowerment. And the final point that I will make is that there are few things in our budget that have such a tremendous return on investment as arts funding. Any investment in the arts, you reap back a huge reward in economic activity in those communities. So when people are always talking about, well, how do we revitalize communities? How do we bring about economic growth? Well, support the arts and support your local arts organizations and the ones that are doing all the work on the grassroots level, and you will see that economic growth that you're looking for.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Once again, we want to thank Senator Serrano and Councilmember Ossé for joining us on this panel. Museum Hue will be in touch with you via email to invite you to our next session on Wednesday, November 15th at 3 o'clock via Zoom. On behalf of Museum Hue, thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you on November 15th.